Hello. So, many people have asked, and by many, I do mean four, about my thoughts of the Tortured Poets Department. Now, if you're a longtime Kenny fan, I'm not looking at the camera. If you're a longtime Kenny fan, you know that after every Taylor album release, I tend to like rant on my Instagram stories for God knows how long. This time I thought I would just make a really low budget, low stakes, just video essay, partially because I love to be a music critic, partially because I just have a lot of complicated thoughts, and also because it's like, hey, if this isn't your vibe, you don't have to tap through 50 stories, you can just skip one video. So here's the thing. If you know me, you know that I am quite possibly the most absurdly obsessed Taylor Swift fan you've ever met in your entire life. And I own that and I celebrate that. I have a tattoo about it. There it is. For a reason. However, I like Taylor Swift a lot, but I also do try to pride myself on at least having a critical eye that isn't just washed over by the fandom. So I wanted to kind of do my best shot at that. Maybe people like it, maybe people don't. I have no idea how long this is going to be. It's going to be really low budget. I have a ring light. So if like, yep, there's the lights. And I'm not editing that out. So, anyway. All right. So this is a Swifties honest review of the Tortured Poets Department. And to do that, there's a couple of things that we have to talk about. The first thing, and like out of the gate, is that when it comes to this album in particular, there's going to be a really fine line between commercial success and artistic success. Leave me alone. We're not, this isn't new, right? We're very familiar with the fact that whatever Taylor Swift does typically turns to gold. Now, you can have arguments about that as much as you want to, about why that is and yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. But undoubtedly, as we've already seen with the Spotify streams, exceeding 300 million on the first day. Worth noting that the original 16 tracks of the album alone accounted for about 232 million of those streams, which still cleared the record by a good 50 million. So I will say, if we're going to diminish things, at least have the facts right. But, the standard album on its own without the additional 15 tracks still would have taken the record as it is. So that's kind of that. Leading up to the album, I thought the marketing campaign was really interesting, mostly because she didn't really market it that much up until like the week before the album came out. Part of this was because she was on tour and she announced, the different variants of the album on vinyl while she was on tour in Tokyo and in Australia and in, other places. And so up until really about a week and a half ago, we didn't get a lot of promo for it, which I thought was really interesting. And I think that really tied into what I think the reason of the album exists. And I'll get to that in a bit. Now, I have been a fan for a very long time. We've been clowning our entire lives about surprise releases, surprise drops, yada, 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 blah, blah, blah. For those who aren't familiar, the rumor of a double album has been spinning around since 2019 with Lover. There was some merch that suggested that maybe there were two albums or things like that, and we didn't know. And every single time that we've gone through an album release for a new album or for a Taylor's version album, we've gone through the same thing over and over again of is it a double album? Is it a double album? Yada, yada. And somehow, with her being so blatantly obvious the entire time and it becoming such a thing, even then I was like, I'm not clowning. I'm not doing that. I don't have the time for that. And nevertheless, at 2 a.m. when we get 15 more songs, I was like, Jesus Christ. I have so much more to memorize. And I'm still catching up on my sleep about that. But the fact that we get an entire album that's 31 songs, I think is really the gaggiest of things that have ever happened. I've never been so shocked. So kind of getting into the album as a whole, I think before I talk about the album, there's a few things that we kind of have to acknowledge about Taylor. And I call them Taylor's biggest hurdles that she just has point blank before she even announces an album, right? The first thing is that this isn't a secret. People don't like her. People have their own reasons for that. I'm not here to argue about it. I'm not here to have a discourse about it. You're entitled to your opinion just as I'm entitled to mine. You can dislike her as much as you want to. There's people who hate her because she's successful. There's people because they hate her because the fans are annoying, of which can't disagree with. There's some people who are jealous that their pop star fave is making makeup lines or doing pharma commercials. And, it just so happens that mine happens to release 3 albums a year. I think this is mirrored with the industry as well. I think, look, we've seen it happen a lot of times where like artists are releasing albums and, end up releasing on the same day as Taylor Swift, with Midnight's Carly Rae Jepsen and Meghan Trainor both released on the same day. Meghan Trainor actually had announced her album to be released yesterday, but changed the date to be like 6 weeks from now or something like that. I don't know. Don't fact check me on that. That's probably not right. We've even seen this kind of in the response of the Grammys where, people kind of were saying that the response was different and things like that. And I think that a really important point about that whole situation is that Taylor Swift is not making music for the industry. She's not making music to be successful. She's already successful. She's making music for the fans, and she knows what the fans want, and she knows that what we want more than anything is just like as much as she'll give us, we'll take it. Call it what you want to for artistic integrity, but from a commercial success, there's no question that it's paid off in dividends. In the same way that Beyonce, her response is kind of the opposite, where it's like there's so much space in between projects and there's such a lack of information that it creates this like godlike entity, which I'm not arguing with. I love Cowboy Carter and I love Renaissance, and most of all of Beyonce's work as well. So there's no knocking that. It's just kind of an interesting kind of insight into that. I think also when you're looking at the album in particular, and the comparisons and criticism and response to it, I think there's a few specifically unique challenges to her. The first thing is that Taylor Swift has already set a bar for herself that is so incredibly high. It's hard to kind of deny that she's written 2 or 3, depending on how you classify it, of the most generationally, culturally defining albums, right? For me, I classify those albums as Fearless, 1989, and Folklore. Each of those 3 albums not only were artistically superior and like above all just incredibly excellent beginning to end, skipless, but also they came to really shape a moment in time of the genre, and it came to really capture the attention of like a generation of musicians, right? Taylor wasn't the first girl to do country, but she was one of few who wrote country music that was aimed at young women. And that has paid off, and now we see her fan base has carried on with her forever and ever. Amen. But I mean, even with albums like 1989 and Folklore, 2 of, in my opinion, the best albums ever created in the history of music, period, point blank. If I have to pick 10 albums for the rest of my life that I can listen to, 2 of them are going to be 1989 and Folklore. So she already has a challenge of, having this incredibly high bar, even for the albums that aren't in that category for me, like Red and Reputation and Midnight's, Evermore, like all great albums that I love and listen to all the time and would not want to part with. But even in that case, right, like, she's created things that are so good that it's difficult to top yourself, and if it's not at that same level, it feels a lot worse. So I know that some people kind of aren't connecting with the album, which is fine, that's their business. But that's one of the reasons where I think a lot of times that, there's a specific, unique kind of struggle that she has to face. And my phone is dying. Oh, well, I can't reach the thing. Okay. Hope I finish before it dies. The other thing that you kind of have to look at is that in the past 5 years, Taylor has released an incredibly large amount of work. Then everyone kind of knows this. For comparison, in the past 5 years, Beyonce's released 3 albums. Gaga has released 2. Adele has released 1. And Taylor's released 5 original albums, 2 of which won the Grammy for Album of the Year, and 4 re-recorded albums, and not including the re-recorded songs, but the vault tracks and with the new material, in the last 5 years, Taylor Swift has written, recorded, and released 130-ish unique songs just on her albums. It doesn't include features. It doesn't include like the stuff that she's written for movies or with Big Red Machine or anything like that. And so that's a lot. And that kind of leads me into my biggest criticism of the album, and even the last couple of albums, is she's done so much, and she's done so much of it with the same kind of core group of people, particularly Jack Antonoff. Now, contrary to what Twitter would like you to think, Jack Antonoff is a great producer. Jack Antonoff is a producer that has defined an entire generation of pop musicians, and the work that he's created with Taylor, with Lana, with the 1975, with Lorde, is really, once in a generation type of talent. Not since Max Martin have you seen a producer be so prolific and so successful with such a range of artists, and really kind of doing their own things. But if you listen to Jack's music, Jack has a very distinct style, right? It's that really synth heavy, layered vocoder kind of stylistic touch that you see in pretty much everything that he does. Even the things where you have like, Lana, for example, it's a lot of times a little bit more stripped down than some of the things that they've worked on in the past, him and Taylor, like 1989 and Reputation. But he's got this gift with this bombastic kind of pop sound. The problem with that for me is that after a while, it does start to sound the same. Good same, great same. In the words of Nora Princiotti and Nathan Hubbard, on every single album, it starts to sound the same. Good same. At times, great same. But one of the things that I love about Taylor is that she frequently pushes herself into new territories and new kind of corners, stylistically, creatively. And I think they're getting to a point where they're kind of brushing up against the edge of what they're able to create, just the two of them. This has been said of Taylor in the past, even from the beginning of her career, which is like with Liz Rose, who did a lot of songwriting with her in her first 4 albums. But, really an editor is sometimes what you really need. Now, before anyone goes off running their mouth, in the past few years, especially with this album, people are like, edit the songs down. She did do that. She did edit the songs down, right? There is a 16-track standard album. That's the album that's, on the CD. That's the album that's on the vinyl. That's the album that's going to be at the Grammys. She did edit. She edited. It's 16 tracks. She gave an additional 15 tracks, purely digital at this time, and will just be kind of like the bonus edition in the same way that the 3 a.m. edition of Midnights is. That's for the fans, because again, Taylor Swift knows that she's creating music for the fans, not for the industry, not for people that don't like her. She's creating music for Swifties, and those songs, what we've seen from the vault tracks, and this is kind of a commentary on the vault track kind of as a whole, it's like these are songs that were not a part of the original album. She knows that, we know that, we are all on board with that. No one is saying that they have to now be considered like the album. We consider them that as a Swiftie collective because it's there and you listen to it. But as a piece of work, the way that I approach those things is it's like, here's the album, and then here's some fun little extras that like give you insight into my creative process. This is really cool with the vault tracks because you kind of get to see where her, pen is going for the next albums, and we get to see that with retrospect on the vault tracks more. But with this, it's like the anthology tracks, the extra 15 tracks that are primarily produced by Aaron Dessner. I love that she put those out because it gives you a chance to kind of see the album in 2 halves, right? There's a first half and there's a second half. You've got these Jack songs that are kind of more fit within like the Taylor Swift, world. And then you've got the Aaron songs that are like a little bit different and a little weird. I love that. I really like that. Contrary to what some people have said, I actually do think it is more exploratory, at least more exploratory than Midnight's was. Personally, I love Midnight's. Midnight's sounded to me like a bit like, 1989's Baby with like Reputation kind of adult attitude. Loved it, streamed it, bought it, glad it, did what it did. But I think actually Tortured Poets is kind of pushing the boundaries a little bit more sonically than people like to say that it does. Now, I think that the boundary it's pushing is in a very specific direction that may not be more pop. And so, that kind of brings me to the other thing, which is that when Taylor first switched into pop music in 2014 with 1989, she kind of defined what the pop sound was for a bit moving forward. And she was kind of, one of those things that was said, which is like with aiming with this 1989-ish, 1980s music sound, it really kind of carves a path for herself that doesn't get caught up with contemporary artists. However, since then, and in the last few years, we've seen with artists that are up and coming, that are new, like Ariana, Ariana Grande has been, but newer artists like Olivia Rodrigo, Renee Rapp, Chappell Roan, Sabrina Carpenter, even less popular artists like Griff and Muna, even Gail to a certain extent. You see a lot of these people who are kind of building this new kind of pop punk sound. You've got Beyonce over here who's like writing a new Bible of music, and like unbelievably so. Max Martin and Ariana are continuing to work and create new things with Eternal Sunshine that I also really loved and sounded really great. You got Dan Nigro with Olivia and Phineas and Billy and their kind of whole space. So the scope of what popular music sounds like today sounds a lot different than it did when Taylor first started making pop music. I think because she and Jack have worked together so much and they kind of have their own distinct sound, it's like the Taylor Swift pop sound. There's not as many new artists, what I'm getting at, there's not as many new artists that are sounding in that universe as there once was. I think that, her kind of the generation that's coming behind her is just going in a different direction, and she just hasn't done that. And she's kind of going in a different direction that's closer to like the indie dad rock island, as Nathan Hubbard likes to say, of like The National and Bon Iver and Lana and 1975 and like all of that kind of stuff. And so I think it's interesting because to me, I know these albums better than anybody. I know them backwards, frontwards, lying down, standing up. Like I can hear a second of a song and tell you what album it's from and which version it is and yada yada. This sounds definitively like a Taylor Swift album because it sounds like Taylor Swift music, but it doesn't sound like, to me, after listening to it, like it's heading in the same direction that Midnight's was in. It sounds like she's pushing outside of this comfort zone. Part of that, I would also say, is going into kind of a more album-specific thing, which is like, this album was a really difficult album for her to create emotionally. She said that. We've picked up on that. Partially why I think that the promo of it was a little bit more subdued. And likely she wanted to work with people that she was familiar with and comfortable with. We know that this album has been in the process for the last 2 years. And so, things like this and Midnight's were definitely being written and created, and the birth of that was around the same time. So the fact that they sound similar isn't or shouldn't be surprising. And, when she's writing about these things that are really personal to her, of course, she wants to work with people that she trusts aren't going to share that information, which is probably why she gravitated more towards using Jack and Aaron as previously. Also, this album is not about Joe Alwyn. Shocker. This album's not about Joe Alwyn. It's not about Maddie Healy. It's not about you know who. It's not about anyone. This is an album about an experience that Taylor Swift had. This is about her experience, her response, and her feelings to it It's not about a specific person or a specific entity. It's about her. Album specific things that I really love. I think a lot of the lyrics, I think these lyrics are some of the best and most mature of her career. I think that it shows a lot of growth, a lot of continued growth from Folklore and Evermore, especially the lyrics that we already heard, such as, I love you, it's ruining my life. Am I allowed to cry? Old habits die screaming. Some people are hating on this, and I'm sorry, I'm not buying it. If Lana Del Rey was singing it, you'd be eating it the fuck up. Like, shut up. Like, if you're gonna criticize, criticize. There's plenty of things to criticize. But, like, some of it's just, like, straight up biased, guys. Like, miss me with that. For me, the entirety of the bridge of the title track is, like, injected into my veins. Also, I Can Do It With a Broken Heart is undoubtedly my favorite song right now. I love it. The lyric, he said he'd love me all his life, but that life was too short. Like, just screams. And also knowing it's about the tour and feeling that. Some other really big highlights for me, the Black Dog, the main, hold on, let me look at my list. Hold on. I had notes. I love Love of My Life. I love Florida. Come on, Florence Welch getting a full verse, like the only woman to have done it. That's not true. The Smallest Man Who Ever Lived, Clara Bow. I love that kind of duality of her kind of framing herself in this narrative. And like I said, I really love the production. I think the production is going in a different direction. I'm really excited for her to push her into, the future of where it's going. And I think I already said, but I really love that there's like the Aaron and the Jack double-sided to it. I think coming down to kind of like summaries, because this is 20 minutes long, coming down to like the summary of it, I think the core of this for me is, who is the album for? The album is for Swifties, period, end of sentence. She knows this. She knows that her fans are the ones that buy albums. Her fans are the ones that buy concert tickets. Her fans are the ones that stream the shit out of these songs, right? Critics will criticize, as is their job. I'm not going to make anything about that. I'm making this. Everyone's entitled to their opinion and their own thing. I think that there are some opinions that are a little, like I mentioned, a little bit unbalanced in their criticism. But, neither here nor there. And I think at the end of the day, a lot of the time when you hear people talk about Taylor Swift's music, a lot of times what I've heard is people say that they don't like Taylor Swift's music because they don't like Taylor Swift. And people who do like Taylor Swift's music because they like Taylor Swift. I love Taylor Swift. And so for me, the style, the sound, the producers, like all of that, doesn't matter to me. Of course I have my favorites and I have the things that I lean towards, but for me, it's like, it doesn't really matter what genre it is, whether it's country or pop or, some crazy third thing, or kind of in between all of those. For me, I love it because it's distinctly hers and her style, and I just really connect with that style of music that she creates. Yeah, so I think that's it. It's 23 minutes, 24 almost. Yeah, if you got questions or want a follow-up, or if you like this and you want more of it, I guess tell me. I'm not gonna edit this, so this is all just gonna be like in it. On my little I need to pull this out more often. Anyway, all right, go stream The Tortured Poets Department, the anthology, and like and subscribe for more content.